If you have ever watched the people you trusted most quietly rewrite your entire life while smiling at Sunday dinner, then you already know how this kind of story starts. It does not begin with screaming. It begins with a text message that feels a little too normal and a pit in your stomach that will not go away. My name is Ashley Sanders. I am 31 years old. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a modest 3-bedroom house near the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. I own a small yoga and wellness studio called Sandia Flow with my friend Brooke Ellis. My husband is Christopher Donovan. His mother is Shirley Donovan. We had been married for 4 years when everything I thought was solid started cracking in ways I could not name at first. Christopher and I had been saving for almost 3 years to buy a small cabin about an hour north of the city, up in the Jemez Mountains. It was supposed to be our future, a place we could rent out for extra income and eventually retire to. I put in most of the down payment from the money I had saved before we got married and from the studio profits. Christopher's name was on the title too, because we were a team, or so I believed. The cabin was the one thing that felt like proof we were building something real together. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday in early spring. I was at the studio finishing a late class when my phone lit up with a group text from the neighborhood Facebook page. Someone had posted a blurry photo of our cabin with the caption, "Anyone know who's selling this place? Looks like a quick flip." I stared at it for a long minute. We were not selling. We had not even finished furnishing the second bedroom. I called Christopher on the way home. He sounded distracted, like he was driving. When I asked about the post, he said it was probably nothing. Maybe someone saw the realtor sign from when we first looked at it. His voice was calm, in that careful way that had started to make my skin prickle. I let it go, because I wanted to believe him. 2 days later, Shirley showed up at the studio unannounced. She never came to Sandia Flow. She thought yoga was for people who have too much time on their hands. She walked straight past the front desk while I was in the middle of adjusting a client's pose and stood in the doorway of the small office I shared with Brooke. Her face was already set in that tight, wounded expression she wore whenever she wanted something. "Ashley, we need to talk," she said loud enough that 2 women on their mats turned to look. I wiped my hands on my leggings and stepped into the hallway with her. "Shirley, I'm in the middle of classes. Can this wait until after 6? She ignored the question. "Christopher told me about the cabin. He said you're being difficult about selling it. I don't understand why you're making this so hard on him. He's under enough stress at work already." I felt the floor tilt a little. "We are not selling the cabin. We talked about this last month. We agreed to keep it for at least 2 years. Shirley's eyes narrowed in that way that always made me feel 12 years old. "You agreed. Christopher needs the money now. His father and I are helping him with some family obligations, and he shouldn't have to beg his own wife for what's rightfully his. You put his name on the deed. That means it's his, too." Before I could answer, Brooke appeared behind me. She had heard enough. "Surely Ashley is working. If you want to talk about family business, maybe do it at home instead of in front of her clients." Shirley gave Brooke a look that could have curdled milk, then turned back to me. "You always did like to play the victim when things don't go your way. I'm only trying to help my son. You should think about what kind of wife you want to be." She left without another word. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the little bell we had hung above it. That night, Christopher came home late. I had already eaten dinner alone. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his tie loosened and his shoulders slumped in the way that usually made me soften. This time, I stayed at the table. "Mom said she stopped by the studio," he said. "She did more than stop by. She told me we're selling the cabin and that I'm being difficult." He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "She's exaggerating. There's been some pressure from Dad's side of the family about an old loan. Mom thinks if we sell the cabin, we can help them out and still have enough left for a down payment on something closer later. It's not like we were living there yet." I stared at him. We put almost everything we had into that place. I used the money from when I sold my car last year. You said it was our safety net. It is still our safety net, he said, but his voice had that flat, reasonable tone he used when he had already decided something. Mom just wants us to be practical. She's been talking to a realtor friend of hers. The market is good right now. We could make a quick profit and move on. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You already talked to a realtor without telling me. He didn't deny it. He just looked tired. I was going to bring it up tonight. You've been so busy with the studio expansion. I didn't want to add more stress. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a text from a woman named Elena Morales, who ran the small property management company we had used for the cabin. She wrote that someone claiming to be Christopher's mother had called asking for copies of all the closing documents and the current deed status. Elena wanted to confirm before sending anything. I called her back immediately. She sounded apologetic. I told her I couldn't release anything without both owners' permission, but she got pretty insistent. Said she was handling family legal matters. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay on your end. Everything was not okay. I drove straight to the small branch bank where we kept our joint savings account. The teller, a young woman who knew us from coming in together, looked uncomfortable when I asked for the balance. She printed a statement and slid it across the counter. $38,000 was missing. The withdrawals had been made over the past 10 days in amounts just under the reporting limit. All of them listed as Christopher Donovan, personal transfer. My hands were shaking when I got back in the car. I called Christopher. He didn't answer. I called again. On the 3rd try, he picked up sounding annoyed. I'm in a meeting. What's wrong? The money from the joint account, almost $40,000, is gone. Did you take it out? There was a long pause. Mom needed help with some medical bills for Dad. It was an emergency. I was going to tell you this weekend. We can replace it once the cabin sells. I hung up without answering. My chest felt tight in a way that made breathing difficult. I sat in the parking lot of the bank for 20 minutes, trying to decide if I was overreacting or if my entire marriage had just quietly shifted under my feet while I was teaching downward dog. That afternoon, Brooke found me in the office after the last class. She took one look at my face and closed the door. Talk, she said. I told her everything, the missing money, the realtor Shirley showing up at the studio, Christopher's calm explanations that somehow made me feel crazy for being upset. Brooke listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Ashley, this isn't just your mother-in-law being pushy anymore. This is your husband helping her take something that belongs to both of you and then acting like you're the problem for noticing. That's not normal. That's not okay. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that families have complicated money stuff, and maybe I was being too rigid. But the words would not come out. Instead, I just nodded. The next day, the rumors started. It began with a text from a woman I barely knew from the neighborhood walking group. She asked if I was doing okay and said she had heard I was going through something and that people were worried. When I asked what she meant, she sent a screenshot of a private neighborhood Facebook group post. It was from an account I didn't recognize, but the details were too specific to be random. It said a local yoga instructor was having a breakdown, draining her husband's accounts and refusing to help his family in a crisis. No names were used, but the description of the cabin and the studio matched perfectly. I showed it to Brooke. She went pale. That's Shirley, or someone she put up to it. This is how she operates when she doesn't get her way. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence. I really did. But 2 days later, another post appeared, this one suggesting that I had been seen getting too close with a male client at the studio. It was vague enough to be denied, but specific enough to make people whisper. The comments were full of concerned neighbors offering prayers and advice about toxic women who trap good men. Christopher came home that night, and found me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open to the posts. He read them over my shoulder and sighed like I was the one causing drama. "People say stupid things online," he said. "Just ignore it. Mom already told me she's going to talk to the group admin and get them taken down." "She's the one who probably started them," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and too calm. He actually laughed a short, disbelieving sound. "You really think my mother would do something like that? She's trying to protect our family?" "You're the one who's been shutting her out ever since she mentioned selling the cabin. You've been acting paranoid for weeks." I looked at him for a long time. The man standing in our kitchen was still my husband, but something essential had already shifted. He was not confused or caught in the middle. He had chosen a side, and it was not mine. That night, I slept in the guest room. Christopher did not ask why. The following morning, I met Brooke at a coffee shop near the studio. She had brought Sean Gallagher, a journalist she knew from a local community paper, who sometimes wrote about small business issues. I had never met him before. He was in his late 30s, quiet, with a notebook he did not open until I started talking. I told him everything: the cabin, the missing money, the post-Shirley's visit, Christopher's calm refusal to see any of it as a problem. Sean listened, without taking notes at first. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you have any of the transfer records or emails between your husband and his mother?" I had printed the bank statements and the email Elena Morales had forwarded. I slid the folder across the table. Sean read through them slowly. When he looked up, his expression was careful. "This is messy," he said. "If your mother-in-law is the one spreading things in the neighborhood groups, that's defamation territory. But proving she started it is going to be hard without her admitting it. The money part, that's between you and your husband right now. Unless you want to involve lawyers." I did not want lawyers. I wanted my life back the way it had been 6 months ago, when I still believed my husband would choose me over his mother's approval. Brooke reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to decide everything today, but you need to start protecting yourself. Document everything, and maybe talk to someone who isn't family or me." I nodded. I felt like I was moving through water. Every step took more effort than it should have. That evening, Shirley called the house phone. Christopher answered in the living room. I stood in the hallway and listened. "She's losing it, Mom," he said, his voice low but clear. She moved into the guest room. "She's convinced you're trying to steal the cabin. I don't know what to do with her anymore." There was a long pause while Shirley spoke. Then Christopher laughed, once a short, bitter sound. "Yeah. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending this is going to work. She's not the person I thought I married." I went back to the guest room and closed the door. I did not cry. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until the room got dark. The next morning, I woke up to another text from the unknown number that had been calling. This time, there was a photo attached. It was a screenshot of a document, the deed to the cabin. Christopher's signature was on the seller line. The buyer line was blank, but the date was 3 days from now. Someone had already started the process of selling our future without me. I forwarded the photo to Brooke and to Sean Gallagher with one line. "They're moving faster than I thought." Then I packed a small bag, left a note on the kitchen counter that said only, "I need space," and drove to Brooke's apartment on the other side of the city. She opened the door in her pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking questions. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe, even if the air tasted like loss. Brooke made coffee while I sat at her kitchen table staring at the photo of the deed on my phone. The signature looked like Christopher's, but the date was wrong. It was from 2 days ago, after he had already told me we were just talking about selling. My hands felt numb around the mug. I kept expecting the screen to change, like maybe I had read it wrong in the dark car on the way over. "He signed it without you," Brooke said quietly. She slid a plate of toast toward me, even though neither of us touched it. That's not pressure from his mother anymore. That's him choosing. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that maybe he had been tricked, or that there was some explanation that would make the knot in my stomach loosen. Instead, I just nodded. The words felt too big to push out. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. This time, it was a screenshot of a new post in the neighborhood group. The photo was of me leaving the studio the day before head-down bag over my shoulder. The caption read, "Some people can't handle real life and take it out on the men who try to provide. Prayers for the family dealing with this." No name, but the details were too precise. Someone had been watching. Brooke leaned over my shoulder and swore under her breath. "We need to call Sean. Right now." Sean Gallagher met us at a quiet diner on the west side of Albuquerque 2 hours later. He had already pulled the public records on the cabin. The deed transfer had been initiated through a small title company Shirley's sister recommended. The buyer was listed as a Shell LLC with an address that traced back to one of Shirley's old friends from church. It was moving fast. Closing was scheduled for the end of the week if both signatures cleared. Sean set his notebook down, but didn't open it yet. I pulled what I could on the money transfers too. "Your joint account shows the withdrawals, but there's also a separate wire from your husband's personal account to an account in his mother's name 2 weeks ago. $42,000. Labeled as family medical support." I felt the air go thin. She told him it was for his father's bills. Walter's been sick on and off, but not that sick. Sean glanced at Brooke, then back at me. "I also found something else. Your mother-in-law filed a small claims thing last month against a previous tenant of the cabin for damage. The paperwork lists her as the property manager with power of attorney signed by your husband. Dated 6 weeks ago." The room tilted. Christopher had given his mother power of attorney over the cabin without telling me. That explained how she could call Elena Morales and demand documents. It explained how the sale had started moving without my signature on anything yet. Brooke reached for my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold. "Ashley, this is coordinated. She didn't just complain. She got him to sign things that cut you out." I tried to picture Christopher sitting at the kitchen table with Shirley pen in hand, while she explained it was just to make things easier for the family. The image made my stomach turn. I had married a man who could look me in the eye every night and still sign away the one thing we had built together because his mother asked. Sean's phone rang. He stepped outside to take it. When he came back, his face was tighter. That was a contact at the title company. "They received a notarized letter this morning from your mother-in-law claiming you have been emotionally unstable and that any communication should go through her or your husband. They're pausing the file until they get clarification." The chaos was accelerating. Every hour something new appeared, another post, another document, another lie that made me sound unhinged and greedy. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a room while the walls moved closer, and everyone else pretended the room was still the same size. We left the diner and drove back toward Brooke's place. My phone rang while we were on the freeway. It was Walter Christopher's father. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe. "Ashley," he said. His voice was rough the way it got when he had been arguing. "I just got off the phone with Shirley. She says you left Christopher a note and took off. She's saying you're having some kind of episode and that we need to get you help before you do something permanent." I pulled the car onto the shoulder. Brooke watched me, eyes wide. "Walter, I left because I found out Christopher signed papers to sell the cabin without me. And because $40,000 disappeared from our account and went to your wife." There was a long silence. Then Walter sighed a heavy sound that carried years of choosing the easier path. She told me it was to help with the medical bills. I didn't know about the cabin. But Ashley, she's my wife. I can't just take sides against her in front of the kids. The kids. He still thought of Christopher as a child who needed protecting from his difficult wife, the same way Shirley had always framed every disagreement. I'm not asking you to take sides, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I'm telling you what's happening. Your son gave your wife power of attorney over something that has my name on it too. She's using it to sell it out from under me while she tells the whole neighborhood I'm unstable. Walter was quiet again. Then he said something I did not expect. She's been like this since before you two met. Always had to control the money and the story. I thought maybe with you it would be different. I'm sorry it's not. He hung up before I could answer. I sat there with the phone in my lap while cars rushed past on the freeway. Brooke reached over and turned the hazard lights on. Back at her apartment, the posts kept coming. Someone had tagged the studio's public page in one of the neighborhood threads, linking it to the rumors about me being unstable and financially reckless. 2 clients had already messaged asking if everything was okay. One canceled her monthly membership. I called Christopher. He answered on the first ring like he had been waiting. "Where are you?" he asked. "No hello, no concern, just the flat demand." "I'm safe," I said. I saw the deed photo. I saw the power of attorney. I saw the bank transfers. Walter called me. Christopher let out a short, sharp breath. "You went to my father. Really, you're dragging him into this? Now, your mother dragged him in when she lied about the medical bills to get $40,000. You helped her. She's family," he said, and the word landed like a door slamming. "You keep acting like this is some attack on you personally. It's not. It's just life. Sometimes families have to make hard choices. You're making it into drama because you don't want to compromise." I felt something inside me go very still. The chaotic swirl of the last few days narrowed into one clear, cold point. Compromise would have been talking to me before you signed anything I said. Compromise would have been not letting your mother post lies about me in the neighborhood group while you pretended it was strangers. You didn't compromise. You chose. He was quiet for a moment. Then his voice changed softer, almost pleading. "Just come home. We can figure this out together. Mom already said she'll back off if you agree to sell the cabin and split the money the way she thinks is fair. She's willing to drop the whole thing if you just stop making it ugly." The offer was so insulting I almost laughed. She would stop publicly humiliating me if I handed over the asset and let her win. That was not an olive branch. That was the same control dressed up as mercy. "I'm not coming home tonight," I said, "and I'm not signing anything until I talk to a lawyer." Christopher's tone flipped back to cold. "Fine. Then don't be surprised when things get worse. Mom's already talking to people at the church about getting you some help. She thinks you need it." He hung up. Brooke had been sitting across from me the whole time. She waited until I set the phone down. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm done pretending I am." That night, I slept on Brooke's couch. I woke up every hour to check my phone. More posts, more messages from clients asking if the studio was safe. One of them had screenshotted a private message from Shirley herself, saying she was praying for Ashley's mental health and that the studio might need new management if I was unwell. The chaos was no longer just between us. It was leaking into every part of my life I had built outside the marriage. The next morning, Sean called early. His voice was tight. "I need you to come to my office. Something new showed up in the records request I filed yesterday. You should see it in person." Brooke drove. Sean's office was a small converted house near downtown with big windows and stacks of files everywhere. He had printed a single email chain and laid it on the conference table between us. The top email was from Shirley to Christopher, dated 6 weeks earlier. The subject line was "Recabin situation." Handling, Ashley. In the body, Shirley wrote, "She'll fight it at first, but she always backs down when the neighborhood starts talking. I've already planted a few seeds in the group. By the time we list it, she'll be too embarrassed to make a scene. Just get the POA signed, and I'll handle the rest. We can't let her keep controlling everything. You deserve better than a wife who thinks she's smarter than the family." Below it was Christopher's reply. "Done. I'll have the papers ready when you come over tomorrow. She's at the studio late on Tuesdays anyway." I read it twice. The words did not feel real, even though they were sitting right in front of me in black and white. My husband had not just gone along with his mother. He had planned it with her. He had known she was going to spread rumors to wear me down. He had scheduled the signing for a night he knew I would be gone. Brooke made a small, furious sound. Sean stayed quiet, letting me read. There was more in the chain messages about how to time the social media posts, which neighbors to talk to. First, even a note from Shirley saying she had a friend at the title company who owes her a favor and could push the paperwork through faster if I started asking questions. The room felt too bright. My hands were shaking, but I could not make them stop. Everything I had been gaslighting myself about for weeks was right there in plain text. The betrayal was not a misunderstanding. It was a campaign. Sean cleared his throat gently. "This is enough to file for an emergency injunction on the sale. It shows collusion and intent to defraud. But Ashley, once this goes public, even in a legal filing, the neighborhood stuff is going to get worse before it gets better. People are going to pick sides." I looked at the email again. Shirley's words about me always backing down when the neighborhood talked stared back at me. She had been counting on my fear of embarrassment to keep me quiet. For the first time since I found the deed photo, the chaotic noise in my head went quiet. Not peaceful, just clear. "I want the injunction," I said, "and I want to talk to a divorce attorney today." Brooke squeezed my shoulder. Sean nodded and started making calls. While we waited, my phone rang again. It was Christopher. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call from Shirley's number. Then a text from an unknown number that just said, "You're making a mistake that will cost you everything." I turned the phone face down on the table. Sean came back in with a printed form for the injunction. "We can file this afternoon. But you should know once it's in the system, your mother-in-law and husband will get served. They're not going to take it quietly." I signed where he pointed. My hand was steady, even though the rest of me was not. Outside, the Sandia Mountains were sharp against the blue sky. The city looked normal. People were going to work, picking up kids, living their lives. Mine had split into before and after that email chain. Brooke drove us back to her place in silence. Halfway there, my phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood group. A new post had gone up, this one from Shirley's account, using her real name. It was a long message about supporting families in crisis and how sometimes the kindest thing is to get someone the help they refuse to admit they need. She tagged the studio and several mutual friends. The comments were already filling up with hearts and praying hands. I closed the app without reading more. That afternoon, while Sean filed the injunction, I sat on Brooke's couch and made a list on a piece of paper. Not of what I was going to do to them, just of what I still had that they could not touch: the studio accounts that were in my name, only the clients who knew me, the small savings I had kept separate, and the fact that I had finally stopped believing the version of me they had been selling. It did not feel like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff I had not realized was there until I was already falling. My phone lit up again. This time, it was a text from Christopher. They served me the papers at work. "Mom is losing it. She says you're trying to destroy the family. If you drop this right now, we can still fix it. Please." I read it once, then deleted the thread. Brooke came back from the kitchen with 2 glasses of water. She set one in front of me. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the list on the paper. It was short. It was enough. I'm going to protect what's mine, I said. And then I'm going to stop letting them decide who I am. Outside the window, the afternoon light was already starting to slant toward evening. Somewhere across the city, my mother-in-law was probably pacing and planning her next move. My husband was probably sitting in his car, trying to figure out how to explain the injunction to his boss. I was sitting on my best friend's couch with a piece of paper that said, I still existed. It was not peace, not yet, but it was the first time in weeks the ground under me felt like it might hold. The call from Sean came while I was still sitting on Brooke's couch with the printed email chain in my lap. He had filed the injunction that afternoon. The title company had frozen the cabin sale pending a hearing. It bought me time, but it also meant Shirley and Christopher would be served papers by the end of the week. I did not want to wait for a courtroom. I wanted one last conversation on my terms. Brooke tried to talk me out of it. They're not going to hear you. They're just going to twist everything. I know, I said, but I need to say it out loud to their faces so I never have to wonder if I should have tried. She drove me to the house that evening. Sean followed in his own car because he had a bad feeling and wanted to be nearby in case things got out of hand. We pulled up just as the sun was dropping behind the Sandias. Christopher's car was in the driveway. Shirley's was parked crookedly behind it like she had arrived in a hurry. I knocked once. The door flew open before my hand dropped. Shirley stood there in one of her church dresses, eyes already red and wet. Christopher stood behind her in the hallway, arms crossed, jaw tight. You have some nerve showing up here after what you did, Shirley said. Her voice cracked on the last word, but the crack sounded practiced. I stepped inside without asking. Brooke stayed on the porch. Sean waited by his car. I came to tell you, I know, I said. I held up the printed email chain, all of it. The power of attorney, the plan to use the neighborhood group, the timing so I would be at the studio, everything. Shirley's face changed in an instant. The tears vanished. Her mouth pulled into a thin, ugly line. You stole private family emails. That's illegal. I should call the police. They were in the public records request Sean filed for the injunction, I said. My voice stayed even. Your own words. You told my husband I would back down if the neighbors started talking. You were right about one thing. I did back down for a long time. I'm done now. Christopher stepped forward. Ashley, this is between us. You didn't have to drag some journalist into it and make it public record. Mom was just trying to protect the family money. Protect it from me, I said. The woman whose name is on the deed and who put in most of the money. You let her convince you I was the problem instead of talking to me like a husband. Shirley let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. You think you're so smart with your little studio and your big opinions. You married into this family. You don't get to decide what happens to our assets. Christopher is my son. Blood comes first. The word blood landed exactly the way she meant it to as a reminder that I would always be the outsider who had to earn her approval. I looked past her to Christopher. You signed the power of attorney. You knew she was going to spread those lies. You chose her version of me over the actual me standing in front of you every single day. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You left. You ran to your friend's house and filed papers. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to be my husband, I said. Not her errand boy. Shirley moved between us like she could physically block the words. You are destroying this family because you're selfish, and you can't stand that we have a plan that doesn't revolve around your feelings. If you drop this injunction and sign the sale papers like a reasonable person, we can still fix this. Otherwise, you're going to regret it when everyone in this city knows what kind of unstable person you really are. The threat was so open, it almost felt like relief. She had finally stopped pretending this was about love or family loyalty. It was about control, and I had taken some of it away. I folded the email printout and put it back in my bag. I'm not dropping anything. The cabin sale is stopped. I've already talked to a divorce attorney. I want the joint accounts separated and my name off anything that has your mother's fingerprints on it. And I want no contact. Not from you, not from him, not through other people. Shirley's face went through 3 expressions in under 5 seconds: shock, rage, then a sudden theatrical crumpling, like she was about to faint. She grabbed the back of the couch for support. "You can't do that," she whispered. "You can't just cut us off like we're nothing. After everything we did for you when you moved here." "You didn't do anything for me," I said. "You tolerated me as long as I stayed small and agreed with you. The second I pushed back, you tried to erase me from my own life." Christopher finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, in a way that went deeper than one argument. "If you do this, there's no coming back. Mom won't forgive it. I won't be able to either." "I know," I said. The silence that followed felt heavier than any shouting. Shirley straightened up, smoothed her dress, and walked past me to the door like I was already gone. She paused on the threshold. "You're going to end up alone," she said almost gently. "People like you always do. Too proud to bend too cold to keep anyone who loves you." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. Christopher stayed in the hallway. For a second, I thought he might say something that could still change the ending. Instead, he just shook his head once, like he was disappointed in both of us, and went upstairs. I walked out to where Brooke and Sean were waiting. My legs felt unsteady, but my chest was clear for the first time in months. Over the next 6 weeks, the legal pieces moved faster than I expected. The injunction held. The cabin sale was blocked. In the divorce filing, I asked for nothing more than what was already mine: my share of the cabin proceeds once it eventually sold, separation of the joint accounts, and the studio that had always been in my name. Christopher did not fight hard. Shirley tried to insert herself through his attorney, but the judge limited communication to written requests through lawyers only. The neighborhood posts slowed and then stopped once people realized the emails were real and that Shirley had been the one coordinating the smear. A few neighbors quietly unfriended her. One of them even messaged me an apology. Sean wrote a careful, factual piece for the local paper about how private family disputes were spilling into public social media groups and affecting small businesses. He did not name names, but the timing made the connection obvious to anyone paying attention. Shirley's social standing in her church circle took a hit she could not repair with tears or prayer requests. None of it felt like winning. I moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment closer to the studio. The first night I slept there, I sat on the floor because I had not bought a bed yet and listened to the quiet. No one was going to text me at midnight with a new crisis. No one was going to show up unannounced with accusations. The silence was complete. Brooke came over on weekends with takeout and helped me hang shelves. She never pushed me to get back out there or find someone new. She just sat with me while I figured out what my days looked like without the constant low-level dread. The studio lost some clients in the first month after the rumors, but the core group stayed. Elena Morales from the property management company became a regular at the early morning classes and eventually offered to help with the books when things got tight. I accepted. Slowly the business stabilized at a smaller, more manageable size. Walter called once 2 months after I moved out. He sounded older. He said he was sorry for how things had turned out and that he hoped I was okay. I thanked him and told him I was. We have not spoken since. Christopher signed the final papers without asking for a meeting. The last communication I received from him was a short email from his attorney confirming the cabin would be listed once the market improved and that my share of the proceeds would be wired to the account I had designated. No personal note, no apology, just business. Shirley never reached out directly. She did, however, send one message through a mutual acquaintance asking if I would consider family counseling so we could move forward with grace. I declined through the same channel. The no-contact boundary held. Some nights, I still wake up expecting the phone to ring with another emergency or another lie. It never does. The quiet is real now. I used to think that walking away from people who hurt you would eventually feel like freedom, light and clean and full of new possibilities. What I got instead was something quieter and heavier. The chaos stopped. The constant second-guessing stopped. The version of me that had spent 4 years shrinking to fit inside someone else's story finally had room to stand up straight. But the room is empty in ways I did not expect. Old friends from the neighborhood stopped calling. Christopher's side of the family treats me like I died. Even some of the studio clients who stayed still look at me with a little extra caution, like they are waiting to see if the rumors were true after all. I do not regret the choice. I would make it again. Protecting myself was the only move left once I saw the email chain and understood how long the campaign against me had been planned. Still, some mornings I sit on my small balcony with coffee and feel the particular loneliness of having been right about the people I loved most. The ironic part is that their plan worked in reverse. By trying to isolate me through rumors and financial pressure, they forced me to build a life that no longer needs their approval or their presence. The studio is smaller, but mine. The apartment is modest, but peaceful. I sleep through the night. I make decisions without running them past anyone who will twist them into weapons. That is the detached calm I live with now. It is not triumphant. It is not bitter either. It is simply the absence of the storm I used to call family. I still teach the early classes at Sandia Flow. Brooke still shows up with coffee on the days I look tired. Elena still helps with the books and sometimes stays after class to talk about her own mother-in-law stories. The mountains are still there every morning when I open the blinds. I do not reach out. They do not reach out. The boundary is clean. If someone had told me a year ago that this would be the ending, not dramatic revenge or public vindication, but a quiet apartment, a steady but smaller business, and the knowledge that every person I used to call family had chosen to believe the worst of me rather than believe me, I would have said I could not survive it. I am surviving it. Some days, it even feels like living. Thank you for listening to my story. What would you do if the people who were supposed to have your back turned out to be the ones quietly rewriting your life behind your back?